I want you to picture something for a second. You are standing on a hill overlooking St. Ives Bay in Cornwall.
Oh, gorgeous spot.
Right. It's a place called Steeplewoods. It is absolutely stunning. 40 acres of lush green nature reserve. You've got native trees rustling in the wind, birds singing, and you have this famous landmark, Nils Monument, just towering above you.
Yeah, it really sounds like the perfect postcard image of the British countryside.
It does. It feels ancient, peaceful, and totally untouched. But, and here's the twist that really hooked me on this topic, that peace is a total fabrication. It's a lie.
It's a mask. A very effective one, but a mask nonetheless.
Exactly. If you were to peel back that layer of green vegetation, you wouldn't find a pristine natural landscape at all. You would find a skeleton. You are essentially walking on top of a factory.
And not just any factory. We are talking about a massive, noisy, and frankly incredibly dangerous engine of the Victorian economy.
Right.
This is the Trellion Consols mine and the wider St. Ives mining district. It's a landscape that was just chewed up, spat out by industry, and then sort of superficially reclaimed by nature.
So today we are doing a deep dive into the hidden industry of Steeplewoods. We've got a really great stack of sources here. We're pulling from geological surveys, some fascinating reports from the Steeple Woodland Project, and even old historical mining directories like Kelly's directory from 1873.
Yeah, the mission today is really to play detective for you. We want to understand how this site went from being an industrial wasteland to a biodiversity haven.
And we really need to look at the human cost of that industry, too. We're going to dig into the brutal reality of the miners' lives, the really strange economic systems they worked under, and some wildly surprising things they found when they finally cleared away the weeds.
Oh, and we absolutely have to talk about the radioactive waste found in the valley below.
Yes.
And the time a supermarket car park literally fell into a mine shaft.
Huh. That is definitely a highlight. Or, well, a low light, depending on if your car was parked there at the time.
Very true.
But let's start with the surface. Because when you look at photos of Steeplewoods today, it looks like an ancient, primeval woodland. But the sources imply this green landscape is actually a pretty recent development.
Oh, very recent. In fact, for over a century, this entire area was effectively a biological desert.
Really?
Yeah, but strangely enough, it wasn't the heavy metals or the industrial pollution that killed the plants. It was actually a gardener's favorite that went completely rogue.
You're talking about the rhododendrons.
Specifically Rhododendron ponticum, yeah.
See, I think of those as nice, purple, flowery bushes. I mean, my grandmother has them in her garden. They look lovely.
They look lovely in a pot. But in the wild, out in a place like Cornwall, they are ecological bullies. They create what ecologists call a sterile understory.
What does that mean exactly? A sterile understory.
Imagine a blackout curtain made of leaves. They grow so thick and they block so much light that absolutely nothing can grow beneath them. No native saplings, no wildflowers, nothing. The soil underneath actually becomes highly acidic and completely barren.
Wow.
So for about 100 years after the mines closed down, this whole 40-acre industrial site was just choked under this thick, dark blanket of rhododendrons.
So it's like nature threw a heavy, suffocating rug over the mess the humans left behind.
Precisely. And in a weird way, it preserved the archaeology by burying it completely. But then in 1999, the Steeple Woodland Project began. Their goal was to go in, clear the rhododendrons, and replant native trees.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, the reports.
Right, because as they started hacking away at this dense vegetation, the industrial history just started to emerge from the dirt. It was literally like uncovering a lost city in the jungle.
What was the first thing they found out there?
Well, the first things they hit were the boundary markers, these big granite stones. In Cornwall, mining claims were called sets.
Sets, spelled with 2 T's, right?
Correct. And marking your set was crucial because if you dug even 1 inch into your neighbor's set, you were technically stealing their ore.
And they took that very seriously.
Very. So they found these granite markers buried deep in the brush. Then they found quarry pits, and they found the sprawling remains of the dressing floors.
Now, dressing floors sounds like a fashion thing or maybe something for a theater, but I'm guessing it's definitely not.
Far from it. The dressing floors were where the raw ore was processed. It was brought up, crushed, washed, and sorted. But honestly, the most surprising find during the whole cleanup was the water system.
The pond, yes. This was my absolute favorite detail from those cleanup reports.
The reservoir, yeah.
They cleared the brush and found this massive header pond. It's about 50 meters long by 15 meters wide, just sitting there in the woods. But the local oral history revealed something hilarious about it.
Oh, the cricket pitch.
Yes. Apparently, in the early 20th century, before the rhododendrons completely took over the entire landscape, this dry, flat reservoir bed was used by the locals as a cricket pitch.
I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. It's a perfectly flat, leveled-out area in a landscape that is otherwise incredibly rugged and steep.
I just love the visual of that. Picture it. It's a 1920. You're fielding it deep mid-wicket waiting for a catch, but you're actually standing on the toxic sediment bed of an abandoned copper mine. And if you drop the ball, you can just blame the heavy metals in the soil.
Right. Sorry, Skipper. The arsenic made my hand slip.
Exactly.
But that cricket pitch actually points to a fascinating paradox about this specific mine and really about mining in Cornwall in general.
Which is what?
Water. Trellion Downs, the exact hill where the mine is located, is high up. It's a very dry spot. There are no natural streams or rivers up there to fill a reservoir of that size.
So where did the water come from? Because you need massive amounts of water to process tin and copper, right? To wash all the crushed rock.
You need millions of gallons. And the irony is, these mines have two massive conflicting water problems. Underground, down in the deep shafts, they are basically drowning.
Because they're hitting the water table.
Right. They have to pump water out constantly, tooting 47 just to stop the tunnels from flooding and killing everyone. But then above ground, on those dressing floors, they are absolutely desperate for water to run the processing machinery.
So they just connected the two problems.
Exactly. At Trellion consoles, the sources suggest they likely created a closed loop. The big steam engine pumped the floodwater out of the deep shafts to keep the miners dry, and instead of just dumping that water into the sea, they poured it directly into this giant reservoir so it could be used in the processing plant.
That is incredibly efficient. The deadly waste product from underground becomes the essential fuel for the surface operations.
It's circular economics, Victorian style.
Let's zoom out to the timeline here, because when we say mining in Cornwall, I think you and I, and probably most people, automatically picture that Poldark era.
Oh, sure. Tricorn hats, candles on the helmets, brooding on a windswept cliff.
Right. But the sources we're looking at suggest the history here goes back way further, and also extends much later than that specific era.
It really does, because right within the boundary of the current nature reserve, there's a site called Wheal King. And that isn't Victorian at all. That is Elizabethan. We're talking 16th century mining.
And what did that look like? Was it the same technology, just older?
Completely different. They had no steam engines, obviously. These were what the Cornish miners called gunnises.
Gunnises, that's such a great word. What exactly is a gunnis?
It's basically a deep, open chasm. See, in the Victorian era, they were very systematic. They sank a neat vertical shaft and then tunneled out horizontally.
Very organized.
Right. But the old Elizabethan miners, they would just find a rich vein of tin right at the surface and just dig it straight out, following the vein down and down from the top. It created these incredibly deep, narrow, jagged ravines that were just left completely open to the sky.
That sounds absolutely terrifying to work in.
It was primitive, brutal work. They used windlasses or just basic horsepower to haul the rock up. But the really amazing thing the sources highlight is just how long people kept trying to squeeze value out of these old pits.
Oh, you mean the story about breaches?
Yes. There's a specific mention in the records of a local character nicknamed Breeches.
The lone miner.
Yeah, this was a man who was out there still picking away at these ancient Elizabethan pits in the 1920s.
That image really stuck with me when I was reading. Think about the massive contrast there. It's the 1920s. You've got the jazz age roaring in London. Automobiles are becoming common. The modern world is really taking shape. And then you have this guy, Breeches, up in the woods in Cornwall, hacking at a 400-year-old trench like a medieval peasant.
It really highlights the severe desperation that set in after the main industrial machine collapsed. He was literally chasing crumbs.
Yeah.
But the real meat of the story, the era that truly reshaped the landscape we see today, is that Victorian boom. This is when Trellion Consols was officially formed in 1849.
I see that word everywhere when I look at maps of Cornwall. Consols, you have St. Ives Consols, Trellion Consols. Is that like a prominent family name?
Yeah.
The Consols family?
No, though that would be a very busy, very wealthy family. It actually stands for consolidated. By the mid-19th century, mining was getting incredibly expensive. All the easy surface tin was gone. You had to dig much deeper, which meant you absolutely needed steam engines to pump the water, and steam engines cost an absolute fortune.
Right.
So small individual claims, places with names like Wheal Venture or Wheal Whitton, They would amalgamate into a single consolidated mine just to share the massive capital cost of the machinery.
And once they consolidated and got that steam power, they could go deep.
They went very deep. Trellion went down to about 50 fathoms.
Okay, I've heard the word fathom used for ocean depth, like on ships, but never for digging into land. How deep is 50 fathoms?
A fathom is 6 feet, so 50 fathoms is 300 feet straight down.
That is a 30-story building, but underground.
Exactly. And to drain a hole that deep, they installed a massive 24-inch double-acting steam engine.
Okay, let's unpack the engineering layout of this site, because the sources describe something that I really struggled to visualize at first. You have the engine house. That's the classic stone ruin with the tall chimney everyone recognizes. That's the heart of the mine.
Yeah.
But the shafts, the actual holes they were digging into the ground,
Right.
they weren't right next to the engine.
No, they weren't. And this is where the engineering gets really Rube Goldberg. They had shafts called Parries and Lowries that were quite a significant distance away from the engine house. So to power the pumps over there, they used something called flat rods.
Flat rods. Okay, explain that to me like I'm 5.
Okay. Imagine massive, heavy timber beams jointed together end to end, running completely horizontally across the ground on little wheels or rockers.
Like a giant train track made of wood?
Sort of, but a train track that is constantly moving. These long wooden rods are connected directly to the steam engine. So as the engine pumps up and down, these rods push and pull back and forth, sliding horizontally across the fields for hundreds of yards.
Wow.
All to transfer that mechanical motion to the water pumps at the distant shafts.
That creates a wild mental image. If you were just taking a stroll through these woods in 1860, you wouldn't just hear the chugging of the steam engine in the distance. You'd see these giant wooden snakes just clunking and scraping back and forth through the grass.
It would have been incredibly noisy, visually chaotic, and very dangerous if you tried to cross the field without paying attention. It's just a complete and total contrast to the quiet nature reserve you walk through today.
So we have the machines, the steam, the wooden snakes.
Yeah.
But I really want to talk about the people. The directory from 1873 mentions that Trellion employed between 70 and 100 people. Who exactly were they?
Well, it was a mix. You obviously had the men underground doing the physical breaking of the rock with explosives and picks, but you also had women and children working there, specifically the ball maidens.
Bell being the Cornish word for mine.
Correct. Bell means mine. The ball maidens worked entirely on the surface on those dressing floors we talked about. Now, it sounds like a quaint, folky sort of name, but the work was absolutely grueling.
What were they actually doing day to day?
They used long tools called spalling hammers. Their primary job was to take the big chunks of rock brought up from the dark and manually smash them to pieces.
Just to separate the ore from the useless stone.
Right. They had to break it down to separate the valuable tin and copper from the waste rock.
So they were just smashing rocks with a sledgehammer all day long.
All day, 12 hours a day in all weathers. Rain, snow, blistering wind off the sea. And to be fair, the men underground didn't have it much better. The heat was a massive factor.
Heat, underground. I always assume caves and mines are freezing cold.
Usually, yes. But in some of the deeper mines in this wider district, temperatures could easily hit 30, sometimes even 40 degrees Celsius.
So it's literally like doing heavy construction work in a sauna.
A sauna full of silica dust, lit by a single flickering candle, with the constant lingering threat of rockfall. It was a brutal existence.
And there's also the immense financial stress on top of the physical danger. The sources talk at length about the cost book system. I initially assumed this was just how they did their bookkeeping, but you're saying it was actually a very specific, high-stakes financial structure.
It was, and it really explains the whole psychology of the Cornish mining industry. It wasn't like buying shares in a modern company where you have limited liability.
Meaning if the company goes bust today, you just lose your share price.
Exactly. But under the cost book system, it was totally different. The investors, who were literally called adventurers, would meet every few months at a local pub or counting house. If the mine made a profit that quarter, great, they got a cash dividend right then and there.
But if they didn't?
If the mine made a loss, the official called the purser would issue what they called a call.
A call.
A direct demand for money. And you, as an investor, had to pay up immediately out of your own pocket to cover the mine's debts.
That is wild. So it's high-stakes gambling. You're not just investing a set amount. You were personally on the hook for the operational losses in real time.
Absolutely. There was no safety net. It created this incredibly short-term mindset. You weren't building an enterprise for the next 50 years. You were just praying for a good next 3 months so you wouldn't get bankrupted by a call.
And that risk trickled all the way down, right?
Oh, absolutely. The miners themselves were often part of this speculative culture. They would bid for pitches underground.
Pitches meaning specific sections of the tunnel.
Yeah, they would contract to mine a specific patch of rock, hoping that their particular spot would yield good ore so they'd get paid a decent cut. If the rock was barren, they basically worked for free.
Wow. Speaking of risks and the lingering legacy of this whole honeycomb underground, we have to talk about Wheal Tesco.
Oh, man, yes. This is one of those stories that sounds exactly like an urban legend, but is completely terrifyingly true.
So for the listener, Carbis Bay is a town right next to St. Ives. There's a normal Tesco supermarket there. It's a very mundane, modern place. You go there to buy your milk, your bread, grab a meal deal.
Right, a totally normal setting. But a few years ago, during the actual construction of the car park for this supermarket, the ground just completely gave way.
It just opened up.
Just swallowed the tarmac. The heavy construction equipment punched right through the surface crust and straight into a massive void. They had accidentally uncovered whip shaft and an old adit from the Trillion console's workings.
Hang on, pause there. I know a shaft is a vertical hole. What exactly is an adit?
Think of an adit like a back door, or really like a drain. A shaft goes straight down like an elevator shaft. But an adit is a horizontal tunnel driven into the side of the hill to intersect the shafts and let floodwater drain out naturally by gravity. It's basically the mine's plumbing system.
So the Tesco car park was sitting directly on top of the 19th century plumbing.
Exactly. And the locals, with that classic, slightly dark Cornish humor, immediately dubbed the whole Wheal Tesco.
That is absolutely brilliant.
It is funny, but it proves a very serious point about this area. The entire town of Carbis Bay is literally built on top of a fragile labyrinth. You park your car to go buy groceries, and beneath your tires is a 300-foot vertical drop straight into the 19th century.
That is genuinely unsettling. It makes you really want to watch where you step.
Yeah.
But Trillion was actually just a mid-sized mine, right? When we look at the neighbors and the sources, things get even more intense.
Trillion was an absolute minnow compared to the giants nearby, like Wheal Marjorie and the Providence mines. These were huge, incredibly wealthy operations, and they did something that terrifies me just thinking about it. They mined under the sea.
This completely blows my mind. So the tunnels go out from the cliffs and continue under the seabed.
Yes. At Wheal Marjorie and Providence, the shafts went down the cliffs, and then they extended out horizontally underneath the Atlantic Ocean.
How deep under the ocean floor were they working?
Not nearly deep enough for comfort. There are actual written accounts from the miners who were working in those upper levels. They reported that during winter storms when the sea was really rough, they could clearly hear the giant boulders on the ocean floor rolling and crashing around right above their heads.
That is, nope, I couldn't do it. The severe claustrophobia combined with the thalassophobia, no thanks. Just terrifying.
It speaks to the sheer desperation and the immense skill of these miners. They were chasing the lodes, the rich veins of tin wherever they went, even if it meant having the entire Atlantic Ocean as your ceiling.
Now, searching for minerals brings us to what I think is one of the biggest twists in this entire story. We're going to move down into the valley now, below Steeple Woods, to a different mine called Wheal Trenwith.
Yes. This is down in the Stenick Valley, right where the modern St. Ives Leisure Center stands today.
And for years, the miners down there had a major problem with rubbish.
They did. They were obviously mining for copper and tin, but they kept running into this heavy, black, pitch-like rock. It was a massive nuisance. It jammed things up. It interfered with the separation of the tin. They called it black copper, but it wasn't good copper. It was completely useless to them.
So what did they do with it?
They did what you do with useless waste. They threw it on the rubbish tip, tons and tons of it. The sources say they literally paved the local roads with it. They filled in potholes around town with it.
Walking all over it every day.
For decades. But then science caught up. It turned out that this useless rubbish was actually pitchblende.
And pitchblende is the primary ore for
uranium.
Incredible.
And not just uranium, radium. This was the early 20th century. Marie Curie had just discovered radium, and the scientific world was going absolutely crazy for it. It was suddenly the most valuable substance on Earth.
So the trash literally became gold.
Way more valuable than gold. In 1908, Wheal Trenwith actually reopened, but they didn't go back underground to dig. No, they reopened just to mine their own waste dumps. They were literally scraping up the trash heaps, digging up the paved roads, and sending this Cornish rubbish directly to Marie Curie in Paris because it happened to be some of the purest radium source material in the entire world.
That is such a powerful lesson in perspective. The Victorian miners were throwing away the dawn of the nuclear age because they were stuck in the mindset of looking for copper.
Exactly. It really forces you to ask, what are we throwing away today? What is sitting in our landfills right now that will be the absolute gold of the 22nd century? Value isn't intrinsic to the rock. It's entirely determined by the technology of the era.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. But sadly, for Trellion Consols back up on the hill, they didn't have a miracle uranium discovery to save them. The end of the story up there is quite a bit more tragic.
It is. It's a cold, hard story of global economics. Trillion Consols permanently closed in 1874. And the reason was entirely global. You had the Great Copper Slump of 1866, and right after that, huge, easily accessible deposits of tin were found in Australia and Asia.
Cheaper tin.
Much, much cheaper. The Cornish mines were deep, they were wet, and they were incredibly expensive to run because of the coal needed for the steam engines. They simply couldn't compete with open-cast surface mining on the other side of the world. And the final math for Trellion is honestly heartbreaking. We actually have the exact figures from the purser's ledgers.
Lay it on me.
Over its entire 25-year lifespan, the mine brought in a total income of £88,760.
Which is an absolute fortune in Victorian money.
It is a fortune. But they spent $89,909 to get it out of the ground.
So wait, they actually lost money?
A net loss of roughly $11,149.
Wow.
Think about that. After a quarter-century of backbreaking sweat, giant steam engines, flat rods, extreme danger, noise, and massive environmental pollution, the whole enterprise technically lost money.
That really highlights just how precarious this entire industry was. It wasn't a guaranteed fortune for anyone. It was a massive gamble that, in this case, just didn't pay off.
And the human cost of that economic collapse was staggering. When these mines closed, there was no government safety net. The miners didn't just retrain for office jobs, they left. Between 1841 and 1901, 250,000 people left Cornwall.
That's a huge percentage of the total population.
It's known as the Great Migration. They took their unique skills, their deep, hard rock mining expertise to South Africa, to the Americas, to Australia. There's an old saying that wherever there's a deep hole in the ground, anywhere in the world, you'll find a Cornishman at the bottom of it. That global diaspora, that spreading of Cornish culture, it started right here, when mines like Trellion couldn't make the math work anymore.
So let's try to bring this all back to the present. We started this deep dive walking through the peaceful green steeple woods.
It really changes how you see that Sunday walk, doesn't it?
Completely. We started with a quiet nature reserve, but we've ended up uncovering a story that spans Elizabethan pits, radioactive waste shipped to Marie Curie, undersea tunnels where you can hear the ocean rolling above you, and a brutal financial crash that emptied out an entire county.
And, of course, don't forget the supermarket car park that might just swallow your trolley whole.
I will definitely never look at a Tesco the same way again. But seriously, it's a profound reminder that landscapes are built in layers. What looks like a natural hill might just be a heap of history.
I think the most poignant thing is looking at those native trees in steeplewoods today. The rich investors lost their money, the poor miners lost their livelihoods and had to cross the ocean. But the trees, they're the only ones that successfully reclaimed the investment. They are quietly growing on the ruins of a massive human ambition that just didn't quite pay off.
It makes you wonder about our current infrastructure, doesn't it? We build these massive server farms, towering skyscrapers, huge wind turbines. In 200 years, will those just be strange, hummocky ground that confused hikers walk over? Are we building things that will actually last, or are we just leaving a different kind of scar for the next generation of weeds to cover up?
Or think about the stuff we bury now, like the deep geological repositories for our own nuclear waste, or those massive transatlantic data cables under the sea. Someday, someone might accidentally punch a hole into one of those while building their own version of a supermarket car park.
That is definitely a thought to chew on. Just maybe don't jump up and down on any unexplained hummocks in the woods while you're thinking about it.
Very good advice. Watch your step out there.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden world beneath St. Ives. We'll catch you on the next one.
See you next time.